on behalf of the Institute for Leadership and Strategic Foresight. Welcome to So You Want to Be the Chief, a podcast for leaders.
Well, it's another blessed day here. I'm in Colorado. My guest is in Alabama somewhere where it's probably nice and warm. It's a little bit chilly here. She is retired Chief Master Sergeant Dr. Emily Shade. Good to see you. I don't know that we've ever met physically, Emily, but at least we have this technology and we can meet this way.
That is correct. It is an honor to be here. Thank you for inviting me. And we haven't met in person, but we've been friends on social media for years. So it is a pleasure to meet you as well.
Yeah, and as I recall, you're an avid, I'll say avid, I like that word, a reader, because you have this calendar where you put all your books and all that stuff. And I like that because, I've written a couple of books. In fact, I've sent you some, I think, I hope. But yeah, so you are an educated person and an educator. Right. But before we get to that, how long did you serve on active duty?
So if we want to get really technical, 24 years and 11 months. But I tend to round it up and just say 25.
Yeah, it's a lot easier, right? Now, was it something that you intended to do, like coming out of high school, and you said, "Man, I have a granddaughter. God bless her. She's a senior, and she says she wants to be an airman." And I tell her, "Well, okay, that's great, but make sure you really do, because it's not what it's all, you don't really get an airplane, you know the ads and all that stuff. Everybody says, hey, I get an airplane. No, not really. But anyway, did you come right out of high school and join up, or how did it happen for you?
No, I didn't. My senior year in high school, I had a full ride scholarship to a college outside of Chicago. And the summer between graduating and leaving for the college experience, that college lost its accreditation. And so they sent me a letter and they said, basically, we would still love to have you, but we no longer can offer you the full ride scholarship. At the time, I was the junior manager of a children's clothing store. And I thought, man, I don't want to wake up 20 years from now and be the general manager of this store. Mm-hmm. And so I went and spoke with a recruiter and joined delayed enlistment. This was in October of 93. And I left for basic training in January of 94. And my main plan was to stay in for 4 years, primarily for the GI Bill. I was looking for a way to get out of just maybe being in the grind or staying in my hometown. My parents had been very clear with me from the time I was very young that if I wanted to go to college, I had to pay for it. And if I wanted a wedding, I had to pay for it. So I was just trying to figure out life.
Well, I think that's fair. And the Air Force helped pay for your education, I assume.
Yes, every single bit of it, except for I did use my GI Bill for the doctorate degree. And of course, when I came in 94, tuition assistance was 75%. So I did invest in the bachelor's degree. But by the time I was into my master's program, tuition assistance was 100%. So I will credit the Air Force 100% for funding my education.
Yeah. And we fought very hard in 94. Dave Campanelli, if you remember him, good friend of mine, that was a big deal. We were, all of us chiefs, all of the enlisted, especially the senior people, were fighting for 100% tuition, especially because we were having issues with, I don't think it was recruiting, but more retention. And, our fight, I remember Dave and I talking about, if we do this, and especially and eventually it happened where you give the money to your children. I'm not sure what because we talked about that in those days, that, that's a huge thing for an airman, an enlisted person, to say, I spent 20 years and my family, my kids get to go to college. That's a huge retention program. And I think they're still doing it. We had a couple of arguments about that. We called it cussing and discussing. That was the official term. But anyway, now you say you're from near Chicago. Where?
No, I'm not from Chicago. Oh. I grew up in Oregon, and my parents were very vagabond, hippie lifestyle. So we moved all the time. Lots of interesting experiences that maybe typical military people wouldn't have had. Yeah. In fact, I was a little reluctant to tell them I was joining the military because they probably wouldn't have ever thought that was something that would have happened for one of their children. Yeah. But they were totally supportive of it. And I appreciate that you were fighting in the mid 90s for education and for retention. I would be arguing that I'm one of your victories, because I really did intend to only come in for 4 years and leave. And then I ended up staying for 25.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's like, and Deb reminds me every once in a while. I was at the 4 year point. I think, Emily, we all go through this. I don't want to stay. This sucks. They wanted me to keep my hair short. Can you believe that? And look at it now. But I ended up serving 50 years all together, and it's a lifestyle. I mean, and you're still doing it. You're retired from active duty, but you're still working at. Is it a GS
It is.
position or okay? And that's still serving. So it becomes a lifestyle. That's what I tell my granddaughter. If you do it, just make sure that you don't say it's for 4 years. Just do whatever you can, and maybe 50 years from now you'll get out as a chief as well. And who knows that? And it's still a lot of fun. What did you do on active duty?
Great question. I had a very unconventional career. So I came in with a guaranteed job of a surgery technician. So I was in the med group. Immediately in tech school, I shredded to ear, nose, and throat, which was always really fun to say because the official name is otorhinolaryngology.
Whoa.
So it's a mouthful, but I was an ENT tech. So half the week in the operating room, half of the week in the clinic. I did that for 9 years. And then I became an Airman Leadership School instructor. I did that for almost 5 years. And then I became an enlisted aide. So I was an enlisted aide to a 2-star general at a NAF, and then a 4-star general at a MAGCOM. And then I became the career field manager of the enlisted aides. So I did some time at the Pentagon, and then came down and finished my career at Gunter as the director of the Air Force Enlisted Heritage Hall.
Mac Vicker. I don't know if you know
Yeah.
Mac.
Yeah.
His dad, Chief Mac Vicker, was one of my mentors. In fact, one of my first mentors. And
That's fantastic.
yeah, and he's Mac Jr. And I've been yelling at him for years. He's a character, but his dad was a character, and he yelled at me for years. So it's like, I guess it's a continuous thing. So a small world. Well, and then so when did you make chief?
I made
During your
chief
25 years?
in 2014, and then I ended up retiring right at the end of 2018.
Okay, all right. Well, a couple of, I think, important questions, Emily. Number one is, what does it take to be an effective chief? However, because I forget to ask this question, do female chiefs have a harder time at getting there and being there? I think the Air Force was way ahead of its time in accepting females, ladies, women. I'm not sure what the term is, the right term is, but we didn't. I don't think we progressed or were as biased as some other organizations against women. But I'm not one, so I don't really know. And I think and I was there at Maxwell. That's where I made chief, and I was brought up by all those chiefs. They they made me earn my stripes, as I know you did. But in the 90s, it was different. We didn't have that many. Now I think we have I don't know what the numbers are, but we have more. And the female chiefs that I know now are pretty well accepted. Most of them say there was no difference. Now it happens to be that the female chiefs that I know are pretty tough ladies. Every time I talk to one, I say, I will never mess with you because you're tougher than I am. So did you feel out of place?
I did not, because I was a female. That I did not. And you mentioned that I read a lot and that the Heritage Hall is in my background. So I am a historian at heart. And so if I'm going to take you back in time, and we see in December of 1959, we have our first chiefs, and we affectionately call them the charter chiefs.
Yep.
That following year in 1960, we saw the first board that selected chiefs. And that's when Grace Peterson was selected. Interestingly enough, her husband was selected for chief the following year in 61. So within the first 3 years of us having the grade and the rank of chief master sergeant, we saw our first chief to chief. And so when you look at like a Grace Peterson in 1960, I would definitely agree with you that we have always been forward leaning as an Air Force when it came to ensuring that the right person was selected for the rank, regardless of what other factors there may have been. Now, you have to ask them, why did we wait so long to have our first female CMSAF when we see that with Joanne Bass? And I would say that 1974 probably offers us a little bit of insight into that. The Air Force created a new policy in 1974 that said if you were female and serving on active duty, you could still stay in and continue serving if you got pregnant. Prior to 74, it was an administrative discharge, automatic if you got pregnant. And so I think that answers the question of why we didn't have very many female chiefs prior to 74. And then if you take a female airman basic, you put her in basic training in 1974, and you give her about 20 years, give or take, to make chief. That's when we see in the mid to late 90s, we see a small uptick in female chiefs, is because we start to see that pregnancy policy catching up with when people would have been making it. And so maybe that makes it a little bit more palatable why we don't see a female CMSAF until Joanne Bass. There are some historic documents that show that there were female chiefs in contention for the position as early as Chief Benneker. So we may have seen a female chief as CMSAF earlier, but again, I'm a firm believer in the rank comes when the rank is supposed to come.
Yeah.
As well as the position. So Joanne Bass was supposed to be our first female CMSAF, and I think the timing was right for it.
Yeah.
So personally, I didn't have any problems or feel any way or discouraged that I was a female serving in the Air Force and that chief was unattainable or attainable to me. I was an airman who was doing the best I could and really believed the rank would come when it was supposed to.
Yeah. And interesting, you mentioned Chief Binnicker, a good friend of mine, God bless him. I don't know that you're aware, but we used to have this program in USAFE for chiefs, kind of what the new chief program is. I say new, I don't know how new it is. But anyway, he'd come out and after he had retired as Chief Master of the Air Force. And one time that he was there, someone asked him, is it time for a female chief? And boy, it made that was before all of the social media and all that stuff. But everyone in the Air Force heard him say, F no. Now, they didn't listen for the rest of what he said because, we sensationalize what we want to sensationalize. And but what he said was, F no, we should pick the most qualified person. If it happens to be a female, great. If it's not, great. But it should be the most qualified person. And no one remembered that or no one listened to that. It was just crazy when he said what he said. So I think you're agreeing with that, and I've always agreed, and plenty of conversations with Chief Binnicker. It should be the most qualified person. Now, when it became Joanne, and in fact, I don't want to say that I knew before because I didn't, but I saw some things. I said she's going to be it. She's got it, and which is okay. But I never lobbied in any way. Not that anybody cares about what I say, but I never lobbied because she was a woman. I lobbied because she was qualified. She had the experience. She had the education. All of the stuff that a good chief master sergeant of the Air Force should have. And I think it paid off. Some people at that level, I think you either have the haters or the lovers. People love you or they hate you, and that's really sad that they hate you because that's probably because they don't understand you. But I consider her a friend, and I'm glad she had the opportunity. Whoever's next, if it's a female after Dave, well, great. If not, well, great. As long as they take care of the force more importantly than that part. Anyway, that's how I feel. What do you think?
I completely agree with you, Chief. Completely.
All right, good. I'm glad because I was going to shut you off if you didn't.
Delete.
Yeah. So back to the my other question, then, Emily. What do you think makes a good? It's not just a chief, but because chiefs are leaders, and we're enamored with leadership. I have my perspective on that. But what makes a good leader? What makes a good chief in your perspective? And you've seen plenty of them. I mean, and as a historian, you studied them.
Yeah, so I think one of the most important factors that we probably undersell in a good chief is a quality of humbleness. that they are able to see that, yes, I've attained this position, or I've attained this, for lack of a better word, notoriety of wearing the rank, but that they're humble and they remember who brought them to that place. Because while we work very hard for that rank and that stripe, and giving our all to the Air Force and to the country, that does not mean that we did it by ourselves. There were a ton of people, good or bad leaders in our way, that were influencing us. There were subordinates that were helping us along the way. There were cultural impacts or societal impacts. There was family impacts. And so there's a lot of influence that gets a person to the chief stripe. And I think if you think I did this all by myself, that's the wrong look for a good chief. A good chief recognizes they didn't get there by themselves. Second, I would say a good chief has goals, not personal goals, although I think personal goals are very important. I started making goals very young. I had a list of 50 things I wanted to do before I died when I was 14. So I think goals are important, but I think, personal goals aside, a good chief has goals for their airmen, things that they want their airmen to accomplish, things that they want to see their airmen succeed, whether that is in uniform or out of uniform. So, I mean, the reality is we aren't going to mentor and or supervise airmen who choose to stay for their entire 20 years or further. They may get out, but shouldn't we want that airman as a civilian to be just as successful as when they are wearing the uniform? And so I think goals are super important.
Uh, and and you're right. We could argue this. No, you and I won't argue because we agree, but some people will argue. I think one of the best products that comes out of military service, and of course better as an airman, because the other services are good, but they're not even close to the Air Force. We know airmen are a lot better than anybody else, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. But we also breed and create and develop good citizens, Emily,
Yes.
and God forbid, but we're in dire need of good citizens, I think, as in our country. People that have humility, people that care about each other and others, not just themselves, and don't do stupid stuff, especially illegal stuff. Boy, do we need that. And my sense is with I know this kid who is I don't want to say too much because he might be listening, but I know this kid who is growing up in a bad situation. He's a sophomore in high school, and he's growing up in a bad situation. And my advice to him is, get through school. It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough, but you can get through school and join the military, because the military is going to mold you into a good citizen, the type of person that you think you want to be. And I think closer than where he's going right now. And even with my granddaughter again, she's a good kid, a wonderful kid. It's not like she needs to be revectored or anything, but she'll be a lot better even after 4 years. I think we all are. And I taught at the academy, and I've been there more this week than most times. But that's what I try to encourage with the cadets. Even, yeah, you're going to be an officer, but you know what? You're going to be a person. You're going to be a leader. Be a good one. Yeah, you'll learn to fly airplanes or whatever you're going to do. But be a good person. Be a good leader. Take care of your people. And that,
Yes.
I think, is again, I think, and all of the services do this better than the civilian world. Sorry, but that's how I feel. I can trust, and the airmen. You can see them along at the airport. You know who they are, because they
Mhm.
first they used to have haircuts. Now they're going back to haircuts. But
Yeah.
anyway, uh, I would trust any of those men and women with my life, because we've trained them right. And but again, I think good citizens, that's a good thing to do. And even, we can argue, some people argue, well, once you get out, you're not a chief anymore. Well, I'm an old school guy, and the old school the ways was, well, once a chief, you're always a chief. And I
Yes.
still do what a chief does. I mean,
Yes.
I hate shaving, Emily. I hate it, but I shaved for you for this.
I love it.
So anyway, uh, you mentioned earlier that you earned your stripes, and especially your PhD. Now, I started a program, couldn't handle it. That was not my thing. So congratulations on that, and I know you did. What did you do? Why was it tougher than usual? I mean, it is tough, especially if you're doing it on. Did you do it on active duty, or did you? take time
I
off to go?
I did. So I had a goal to finish the doctorate degree while I was on active duty. I referred to, I think goals are very important. Personal goals are important. I also truly believe that we need to own it when we don't meet the goals that we set for ourselves. So I wanted to complete the doctorate degree before I retired from the Air Force. And I started I call it my sabbatical, but my terminal leave and my time of unemployment started in September of 2018, and my doctorate was conferred in February of 2019. So I
Wow.
missed it just by a small, window. I could have extended and not retired in December. I could have tried to make that goal work, but it just wasn't the right time for my family for me to stay. So I did work really hard on that doctorate degree, and I did it while I was on active duty, but it was awarded afterwards.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know. We can disagree. Everybody says it's the journey, it's not the arrival. I think that's crap. It's the arrival. When you get that piece of paper in your hand, and did you wear the cute little outfit, and all that?
I did. I did. In fact, Air University just conferred an honorary doctorate degree for Newt Gingrich last week, and I wore
Mhm.
the outfit for that as well for that
Okay.
ceremony. So I'm getting my money's worth out of wearing it.
Yeah, yeah. Now, how do you feel about, you said you earned your stripes. Why do you say that? And
Um,
and, and we got to say, the old argument is there's a difference between E9s and chiefs. Well, okay, get over it. But a chief is a chief, and the Air Force says you're a chief, regardless of what all that. Sometimes it's political, but it doesn't matter. The Air Force says you're a chief, you're a chief. So, did you do something extraordinary to make chief?
No, absolutely not. I did what I knew was right. I lived by the core values, and I worked really hard for the Air Force. And again, the stripes come when the stripes are supposed to. That's my personal opinion or my own philosophy on it. I was a staff sergeant for a very long time. I could not test well for tech. And that's okay. I was supposed to be the best staff sergeant I could be for that 6 years. And that's okay. So when I say I earned my stripes, I did what I was supposed to at each level and concentrated on that level. I know that there are folks out there that they're a proponent of you should be looking one or two stripes ahead of yourself and be working or striving for that. My personal thought process on it was I need to focus on what I'm doing right now and be the best that I can be. And a great example of this is when I made chief, the chiefs group up at the Pentagon, they actually gave me orders and put me in an assignment that was a chief's billet when I still had my line number. I joke around that I was on the caboose that year. I was like the second to the last line number, and I'd rather be on the caboose than not on the train at all.
Right.
But I had that line number for almost 13 months before I put chief on.
Wow.
They had me in a chief billet, acting as though I was a chief while I was still wearing senior master sergeant stripes. And the command chief at the NAF equivalent at that time approached me very early on and said, "We've got to get you set up for this course and this one and this leadership experience because we want to put you on the track for command chief." And I said, "Can I figure out how to be a chief first?" And at that moment, I didn't realize that that was sort of closing a door to the command chief potential because I was essentially declaring early that I didn't want to go down that path. I wanted to be a true chief and be with, I shouldn't say true chief, command chiefs are true chiefs as well, but they're not in the trenches with the airmen. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be with airmen. And so that's an example of where I just wanted to figure out what I was supposed to do with that stripe in that moment versus looking for the next step.
Yeah. Well, I'm proud of you for thinking that way, for doing that, Emily,
Well,
because
thank
to me, my personal opinion is that command chief thing is the stupidest thing we've ever done, and it's it it's created another rank, really, and the command chiefs will tell you no. Yes, that's true. And I've known a lot of people that that's what they're striving for, and then they neglect, like you just said, being the chief at your squadron, doing the things that you're supposed to do, taking care of the people, because they're just focused on that next thing and whatever.
you.
Which I wasn't brought up that way. I was a senior enlisted advisor, It was a position not any bigger or greater than all the other chiefs. In fact, I didn't even have a chief's spot at the club. Uh, Long story there. I'll share with you sometime. But my boss and Dave Campanelli and folks, we didn't buy that should become something that you do as a profession. And again, many command chiefs that I know, I respect them and they're great people, but it's different. I don't like it. The title. I don't like it. You don't need a title, right? We say that you don't need a title to be a leader. Well, we give you a title to be that I don't know. I don't like it. But anyway, and I always thought, yeah, be in the trenches with the airmen. That's
Mhm.
the fun of it. If you're up there, doing the other stuff, the bureaucratic stuff. I'm not a bureaucrat. In fact, I was picked. I guess I was picked. No kidding. I was on the phone with people, the transportation people, picking up my furniture at Maxwell. I didn't have an assignment. They were picking up my furniture. I'm on the phone asking, where am I going? Because these people have to ship my stuff somewhere. But we closed the band down there at Maxwell, so I had to go somewhere. And no kidding, I'm standing there watching them pack up my stuff, not knowing where I'm going. And they luckily, and these were good people. They said, "Well, we need you at the Pentagon." I said, "Okay, fine, but as soon as I arrive, I'm going to put in my paper because I don't do that. I'm not a paper pusher. I'm a people pusher. So I will retire in 2 years as soon as I get there. No, no, no. We need you more and all that stuff. Okay, well then don't send me there." And they sent me to March, which is where I started, which was a great thing to make a cycle. But anyway, for those chiefs that are command chiefs, get over it. But to the other chiefs that are trying to be chiefs, yeah, stay down there because that's what we need you. We need you to be a good chief. I interviewed Garcia, Chief Garcia, the other day, who was who is a vehicle maintenance chief in Alaska. That's the job I always wanted.
No.
Because that's a tough job, no kidding, getting dirty with doing all the stuff that everybody takes advantage of and gives no credit to. How did they get from A to B? Well, the vehicle guys got them there. Nobody knows, nobody cares. But I think that would have been the great job. But he's doing it, so he's my hero. So with the heritage stuff, Emily, and the history stuff, are you creating or developing any new initiatives? Or I mean, history is kind of backwards, right? It's stuff that happened.
Yes.
So are you doing anything in the future for us in that direction?
Yeah, absolutely. So, probably when you were at Maxwell, we were just starting up the Heritage Hall.
Yeah,
Is that about the same time period?
yeah,
Chief
yeah,
Bobby Renfro, Chief Wayne
yep,
Fisk, we're all
yep,
here at the Senior
yep.
NCOA and started the Heritage Hall. What I would love for people to know is it is the only enlisted centric museum in the Air Force. And at that time, it was probably, if I had to guess, a couple thousand square feet. We are now at 14,000 square feet. We've had a
Wow.
couple of additions.
Yeah.
And so the current curator over there, Mrs. Melissa Sims, she's working on a couple of initiatives right now to bring some current ops type of displays to the forefront. One that is a display that I absolutely adore, and it is going to continue to grow, is called Airmen Facing Terrorism. And it is a concept of highlighting our airmen that have faced terrorism when they least expected it.
Mm.
So when we deploy and we go down range, we're expecting to see the bad guy. We're not necessarily expecting to see the bad guy at the Boston Marathon. We're not expecting to see the bad guy in the Aurora, Colorado theater shooting. We're not expecting to see the bad guy at a coffee shop in Wichita Falls while you're studying to become a medic, and a white supremacist comes into this coffee shop and targets people. You're not expecting that. And
Mhm.
so this display is going to highlight airmen that we've lost at the Oklahoma City bombing, the airmen that we lost in Aurora, Colorado, the fact that we had Air Force guardsmen that were first responders during the Boston Marathon. So that display is just, it really makes my heart sing because we're going to honor those airmen, and some of which gave their lives, and others who just saw some horrific things here with domestic terrorism.
Yeah. And is this just enlisted people, or will you include officers?
So we're doing enlisted because our mandate or our mission for the Enlisted Heritage Hall through the National Museum of the Air Force is that we will tell the enlisted story. There are a few places where we tell an officer story within the museum. For instance, Chief Wayne Fisk started the
Yeah.
Wall of Achievers, which you may
Yep.
recall.
Yep.
Initially, it was designed to honor prior enlisted general officers. And so you have people like General Spencer, General Deppy, lots of former enlisted general officers that are
Yeah.
on the wall. It morphed throughout the years to include other people of notoriety that were prior enlisted. For instance, Chuck Norris or Bob Ross, they're on the wall. And so that's a place where we've told an officer story. Another example would be we have the actual test uniform for the SR-71. We got that donation. It was a pilot's back when it was, Skunk Works, and we weren't
Huh.
even talking about the SR-71.
Oh.
We thought, man, this is such an amazing donation, but we can't tell this officer story. How are we going to be able to keep this artifact here and tell an SR-71 story? Well, we did a bunch of research and we found out that it was our med techs that were dressing the pilots out, and they were actually monitoring their vital statistics and their vitals while they were doing these tests. So the display is actually telling it from the enlisted medic story,
Wow.
but then we're able to tell an officer story also. So
Yeah.
to answer that question, in the airmen facing terrorism, we will likely have some officer stories that are, for lack of a better word, a byproduct of telling the enlisted story.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got a couple of one, I will connect you to these particular people. One, he's a reserve master sergeant who was at the theater in
Okay.
in Denver when that happened, and I'm sure he can give you his perspective. Pretty scary, of course. And one of our graduates from the academy. Now, his dad is a senior master sergeant. Maybe there's a connection there. He taught him
Sure.
right, but he saved a bunch of people in Istanbul in the airport there when there was a terrorist bombing.
Okay.
And he had just graduated, Emily, just graduated. I don't know that you know, but after they graduate, they get 60 days of leave. And he was on his 60 days with his friends. And they show up, and it was kind of they weren't supposed to go through Istanbul, but they did. And then this happens. And the great thing about it is that he took over and led them to safety, a bunch of Americans to safety. So I'll connect you, and maybe you can
Love
use it.
that.
But great story anyway, and you would love to talk to him anyway. But so anyway, well, I know you're busy because you get paid to do what you do. I don't. I'm twice retired, and it's great. I don't answer to the man. I answer to the woman who's calling me upstairs to take the dogs out, and that's way more important. You know what I'm talking about.
Yes, Chief.
But thank you so much for being on the show. And if we can help in any way to, because you're doing some great work there to help the enlisted corps, educate the enlisted corps. Is there a website for the Heritage Hall?
There is, and they can find us on Facebook under the Enlisted Heritage Research Institute.
Okay.
And that team does an amazing job of putting history out as it's happening, remembering dates. So, yeah, I would say follow that.
Yeah, will do. Well, take care of yourself. I got to get to Maxwell sometime, Gunter, and all that kind of stuff. So when I do that, we'll have some crawfish.
Okay, let's do it.
God bless you.
God bless you.
Thank you for listening. We hope that you've gained something from this episode that will empower you to become a more effective leader. If you'd like to connect with us, please do so via our website at leadershipandforesight.org. The book So You Want to Be the Chief is available on Amazon.com and on Apple Books. This podcast is powered by the Institute for Leadership and Strategic Foresight.